folks, my name's Lisa. Welcome to my channel. Today I will be showing you how to knit the 2x2 rib stitch as you see here in the swatch. This is an easy to learn knitting rib stitch pattern. It's great to use for borders for your sweaters or the cuffs to your sweaters, as well as necklines and the brims to your hats, and also for your socks. Here I have a swatch of the 2x2 rib, and this is the front side of the fabric, and if I turn it over, it's identical, or nearly identical. It's just the reverse of the knit and purl stitches, but it gives the same effect. The 2x2 rib stitch is, as you can guess, is a multiple of 4 stitches where you knit 2 stitches and purl 2 stitches. So when working with the rib stitch, make sure your stitch count is even to create the 2x2 results. If you want the project to look symmetrical, I suggest not only a multiple of 4, but a multiple of 4 plus 2. The reason why is this. For this right side fabric, this swatch was made with a multiple of 4, and I started with knit 2 and then purl 2. And because I'm completing a knit 2 purl 2 sequence, it ended on a purl 2 on the swatch. And it's just not as symmetrical. You would want it to be a multiple of 4 if you are working in the round. But if you're knitting it flat with 2 needles and you want it to look symmetrical, you would want to do a multiple of 4 plus 2, so that the beginning starts with a knit stitch and the end ends with a knit stitch. So today I'm going to show you how to cast on for the 2x2 rib stitch. Then we'll work on the actual pattern of the knit 2 purl 2 sequence, and then I'm going to show you how to bind off for this rib pattern. So let's get started. So for this swatch that I'm going to show you, I'm going to make it symmetrical so it begins and ends with a knit stitch. And so I'm going to do a multiple of 4 plus 2, and I'll cast on 18 stitches. And I'm going to use the long tail cast on method because that's how I usually cast on for almost all of my projects. It keeps the project consistent, and for the rib stitch I think it makes it look most professional. So I'll cast on 18 stitches. If you do not know how to do the long tail cast on, you can look at the link that's listed above here, and then I'll also have it in the show notes below. So we have 18 stitches, and we're going to start the sequence, which is knit 2 purl 2, by knitting the first 2 stitches. A really important tip I have for when knitting in the rib, whether it's the 1x1 rib or the 2x2 rib or any rib pattern, is if you want the stitches to stand out, it's important to not knit the stitches in the front stitch like that, but to knit the stitch in the back of the stitch, and consistently do this throughout the piece, and this will define the stitches better. So that's the first knit stitch, and then we're going to knit in the back of the second knit stitch. And now we're going to take the yarn and move it to the front and purl 2 stitches. Take the yarn and we'll move it to the back. Go to the back, twist the left needle towards you, and go to the back of the stitch to knit it. Now, if you end up knitting it in the front, don't worry. It's not going to look bad. In fact, this one was done by knitting the stitches in the front. I tend to knit the knit stitch with the needle going in the front. But I want to show you what it looks like if you knit the knit stitch in the back and how more defined the stitches are. Either way is correct. It's just the way I'm showing you right now to knit the swatch will make the stitches stand out a little bit more crisp. That's all. And if it doesn't matter to you and you're more comfortable knitting your knit stitch towards the front of the needle, then do it the way that it works for you. There's no wrong way in knitting. Okay, so I did the first row. You can't really tell what it looks like yet. It's looking a little sloppy. But I did knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, knit. So it's going to begin and end with knit. When I turn it over to the second row, I'm going to purl into the purl stitches and knit into the knit stitches. And if I'm not sure what stitch I'm working on, I can easily look at the stitch that's on the left needle. And right here, I'm not sure if you can see it, but there's bumps. And that indicates that these stitches here are a purl stitch on this side. So that tells me I need to start with a purl stitch. I can also tell, like if I put the needles down and come back and I'm not sure what the last stitches I did for the 2x2 rib, I can look at this again and look and see whether it's a bump on the stitch, like these two, or if there's lines or the V's. So these next two stitches show the V's or the straight vertical lines, and that indicates that this is going to be a knit stitch that I need to do. So the straight lines indicate a knit stitch to knit, and then the bumps indicate a purl stitch to purl. And regardless of where you are in the project, if you're doing 2x2 rib and you see that there's a knit stitch, you know to knit into the knit stitches and you know to purl into the purl stitches, and they have to be sequences of 2. So I've done 2 purls and now I'll do 2 knits. Now purl and knit. Purl, knit, purl, so I've done 2 rows. The first row is knit 2, purl 2 throughout the row, and then the second row, or wrong side, was purl 2, knit 2 throughout the row. I'm going to continue this sequence for these 2 rows, and I'll do it for a handful of rows, and I'm going to speed this up so you can then see what the results look like. Okay, so I've done a few more rows of the knit 2, purl 2 rib. This is the example. Neither of these have been blocked, but I wanted to show you the example here has the knit 2, purl 2 knit with the stitches knitted in the back of the knit stitches. The purl stitches are done as you normally would purl. And then with this one, it is knit, the stitches are knit in the front of the knit stitches and purled normally. I don't know if you can see too much of a difference, but it does to me look like these are crisper stitches. They're more defined, but it really, whatever you're most comfortable doing, I think is what you should be doing. And if you're not too particular about how the rib stitch is going to stand out, I think this is perfectly fine, this gray swatch, where I knit what's comfortable to me in the front of the stitch. That to me wouldn't bother me at all for a project. But if you are wanting the rib stitches to really stand out, maybe knitting in the back would be the better choice. So now it's important to show you how to bind off the stitches in the 2x2 ribbing. Also, this applies to a 1x1 ribbing. And I want to show you what it looks like if you just cast off the stitches purely with a knit stitch and not in pattern. You're going to get the straight edge here, which is maybe something you want it to look like. But if you want it to be consistent with the way the stitch is flowing for the pattern, then you need to bind off in pattern. Otherwise, you're going to get a flat stitch up here, which is going to alter the way the project lays, and it just doesn't look right. It looks a little wonky. So I'm going to bind off this swatch in pattern. I'm going to knit the first 2 stitches, just as I've been doing for all the rows. And then I'll bind off 1 stitch. And then the next stitch is going to be a purl stitch. And I'm going to bind off. And I still have 1 more purl stitch. And bind off. And now I'm back to the knit stitches. One more knit. Purl now. Knit. Now we're going to purl. Okay, you can see how this looks nice and consistent. And here's the difference between those 2. This is one that's cast off in only knit stitch, and then this one was bound off in pattern. And there you have it, the 2x2 rib stitch pattern. I hope this tutorial has helped you learn the 2x2 rib stitch pattern today, and if it has, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more pattern tutorials. I can't wait to show you the next stitches. And until then, I hope all your dreams come true and you do something nice for yourself. And happy knitting!